Welcome to DIYEasyCrafts.com, how to make your own mini neck knife. Now these neck knives are small, compact, easy to carry, and this particular design is very, very easy to make. It's made out of a piece of 1/8 thick 1095 carbon steel. I used some scrap teak that I had for the handle, but really all you need to make this is a disc grinder, a Dremel grinder, and a drill. That's about it. Made the sheath out of Kydex, which is also very easy to do. I covered that in a separate video. And that just hangs around your neck. It's held securely in place. But I started with that piece of 1095 steel, and I just drew the basic design just with a black Sharpie marker. And then I used the disc grinder with a cutoff wheel. And you can basically cut out the whole outline of the knife with this cutoff wheel. For the internal curves on the handle, you do have to make a series of plunge cuts, and that's what I'm doing here. And then you can come in from the side and just kind of whittle away at that and remove as much material as you can with that cutoff wheel. It just goes much faster. It doesn't really take long. I finished the entire cutout of this tiny knife, probably in 15 minutes or so, 10-15 minutes. So I've made the plunge cuts, and now I'm just cutting away some of those pieces. And then the next change is going to be to take that disc grinder and just change that cutoff wheel to a flap sanding wheel. And this is just a sanding wheel that has a series or layers of sandpaper, and they are very efficient. This is a 40 grit, and you can very quickly smooth out all of the rough edges and basically take the knife to the end shape. I did end up using a Dremel grinder with a little grinding wheel just to get at some of the curves, the internal curves. I am going to also use that disc grinder with a drum sanding wheel in order to do the bevel on this knife. So there's no need for a big belt sander or anything like that. The bevel on this tiny knife is actually very quickly done with a Dremel grinder and a drum sanding wheel. Don't forget, you're not going to see that sharp edge of the bevel with the rustic look that this knife is going to be. I did use some sandpaper. I sanded this. I went from an 80 to a 220 on the sandpaper. You don't have to bring it to a real polish. You just really want to smooth up all of the rough edges and get out some of those deep scratches. You do want to drill the pinholes before you harden the steel. I ended up drilling 1/4 inch hole through the butt end, and then a 1/8 hole closer to the blade. And now I'm going to add the scalloping or the hammer marks into each side of the blade. I'm going to go back to that Dremel grinder with the drum sanding wheel and just make little grooves. Very simple, very fast. You can see here one side's done, and the other side is about to be done. Here you can see how fast it is. You just take the kind of the corner edge of that drum sanding disc or drum sanding wheel and just move it back and forth a little bit, and you grind a little bit of a divot into that carbon steel. Ready now for heat treating. Now this knife is so small that I didn't even have to run it over to my friend's metalworking shop or use his forge. I was able to heat it up to a cherry red just with a small torch. If you've never heat treated before, I did a separate video covering annealing and heat treating, but basically you have to bring the blade to a point where it is non-magnetic, cherry red non-magnetic, and then quench it quickly in oil. I am then going to do some spine file work. I don't use a file, I use the Dremel. It's just a little bit faster and easier before I temper it in an oven, and then I can finish it up. To do the spine file work, I just basically marked every 1/4 inch with a marker, and then basically every 1/2 inch I put a groove, really trying to hold the same diagonal or same angle with the Dremel grinder. And what you end up with is a kind of a cool design on the spine of the knife that's really going to show up after you put the handles on. Now, after heat treating, the metal is basically black. I'm just going to use a 600 grit fine sandpaper or emery paper to polish off the blade just a little bit. You really just want to polish the top surface and leave the black in each one of those grooves. And that's how you get the real contrast and real rustic appearance of this blade. Now this is the teak. I had some scraps laying around. I just cut a couple of pieces and roughed them to size. I always cut the handles or the scales as they call them a little bit oversized, and then after I attach them to the blade, then I sand them to size. Now there are several videos out there, including mine, on how to put a handle on a knife. Try not to be as clumsy as I am and drop everything all the time, but it's a pretty simple process. I'm using 2-part epoxy. I put the pins in place, both scales in place, and then it all gets clamped together until that epoxy is completely dry. On this knife, I am using a mosaic pin on the butt end. I'll show you in another video how to make those pins. It's a pretty easy process. Once you finally finish sanding that handle, the knife is done. I oiled the handle with some teak oil, and I also oiled the blade itself. And you end up with a very rustic, very unique looking mini knife. Now many people hang this on a sheath from their neck, straight up and down. I prefer to have it kind of on an angle so that when you're inserting the blade into the sheath, you're not pushing the sharp blade up towards your neck. In order to do this, I wanted to make a Kydex sheath for this blade. I'm not going to go into great detail on making sheaths. Working with Kydex is very simple. You just basically heat it up a little bit in the oven and then fold it over the knife and press it in a makeshift press. And when it's hard, then you can cut it to its finished shape. You can use grommets to hold it together, but this is the finished sheath, and it really holds the knife securely. Here's the finished sheath, and I'm going to try to take some video and also show you the knife at the same time, so this may be a little bit jittery. But the knife slides into the sheath fairly easily, and you can almost hear it clicking. And then once it's in, it's secure. It's not going to fall out. 2 hands to take it out, and really just 1 hand to push it back into the sheath. And this sheath is designed to hold the knife at an upward angle so that you're basically putting the knife in sideways into the sheath. Please join us on the web at DIYEasyCrafts.com. Be sure to check out our other how-to videos. And if you like this video, I ask that you please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to this YouTube channel.